For years, the world believed I was dead. To society, my name was just a whisper, a tragic memory that served as a backdrop for family speeches, old headlines, and stories told with teary eyes. But the truth was simpler. More painful too. My name is Madison Langford. Or, as I was known before, Madison Langford Wilson. Daughter of William and Elizabeth Langford, the magnates behind Langford Holdings, one of the largest shipping companies in Latin America. I grew up under the weight of that surname, with the sea as my backdrop and the duty to represent my family's legacy like a chain attached to my ankle. They had plans for me, a future already written with a wedding date set. But at 24, at the height of my youth and lucidity, I did something unforgivable. I said no. I refused an arranged marriage with a strategic ally. I didn't want to be a bargaining chip. I wanted to live, to choose, to love, to be. And for that, I was killed. At least officially. A fake boat accident, an empty casket funeral, tears shed for the cameras, and a heartbreaking story to hide what really happened. The rebellious daughter didn't want to follow the script. I fled with little more than a backpack and the compass pendant my grandmother had given me the night before. She knew. She looked at me with tired, wise eyes and said, "Sometimes the right path is the one that scares you the most." That was the last time I saw her. With a new name, a new identity, and tons of fear, I started from scratch. I worked as a waitress, a translator, a logistics assistant, until I founded my own company, Aurora Axis. With sweat, sleepless nights, and bold decisions, Aurora grew quickly, modernizing routes, using technology and data intelligence, offering sustainable solutions where the dinosaurs of the sector still bet on blind tradition. While the Langford Holdings continued to celebrate their own echoes, I grew in the shadows, buying small ports, forming alliances, growing slowly and steadily. And then, 10 years later, I was ready. The notice was sent like any other board meeting. Formal, objective, with a dry title, Strategic Merger Proposal, Confidential. They didn't know who was behind it. They didn't even dream of it. The press was also invited, of course. After all, it would be a historic event for Langford Holdings. I didn't lie at any point. I just let them fill in the blanks with their usual pride. On the morning of the announcement, I chose Aurora Blue, the strong tone that recalls the sky just before dawn, and attached my grandmother's pendant to my necklace. I took a deep breath before entering the conference room. A small, petty pleasure, I confess. But after all, I deserved it. As soon as I walked through the door, silence fell like a curtain. Startled looks, cameras ready, nervous whispers. I went up on stage, no longer hidden by fake accents, sunglasses, or fake names. "Thank you for being here," I began, my firm voice echoing in the room. "My name is Madison Langford, or as some of you may remember, Madison Wilson." Chaos was immediate. Cameras snapped, reporters shouted questions. And somewhere in the crowd, I heard a sigh, my mother Elizabeth's. I raised my hand. "Silence, please." I continued, 10 years ago, the Langford family announced my death. An accident at sea. The truth is simpler. I chose to live my own life. I refused an arranged marriage and left. My father found it shameful. He preferred to bury an empty coffin than admit that his daughter had defied him. My father, William, stepped forward. His face was closed, his eyes flashing with suppressed anger. But the security guards, my security guards, held him back. I continued. During this decade, I have achieved what was told to me was impossible. Aurora Axis has revolutionized the logistics industry, adopting technology, intelligence, vision. While Langford Holdings, well, I turned to the board. Today, I announced the merger between Langford Holdings and Aurora Axis. The Langford name will be maintained out of respect for history, but the company will be completely restructured. All current board members will be retired with generous packages. The room erupted in reactions. Screams. Questions. Shock. But in the back of the room I saw Ava, my sister. Ava stood in the back, motionless, as if time had frozen around her. She didn't blink. Her eyes were watery, her lips parted. I knew that look, not fear, not anger. It was disbelief, maybe even pain. And for a moment, even with everything I had faced, my heart wavered. My sister was the only one who, perhaps, didn't deserve this public shock. But I couldn't back down. Not anymore. On the opposite side of the room, my father looked like a marble statue, cold, hard, breakable if touched too hard. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was hoarse. "This is a farce. This woman. She is not my daughter." A buzz spread. The cameras turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I approached slowly. I opened the necklace and showed the golden pendant, shaped like a compass. "Mrs. Julia Langford, my grandmother, gave me this the night before I disappeared." "You must remember," I said firmly. I saw my mother's expression contort. The color drained from her face completely. "You have no right to do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am not here asking for permission, Mother. I am here to take back what is rightfully mine. The company they built on lies, rotten alliances, and the silencing of those who think differently. I am Langford by blood, but in my own way." The shareholders were in shock. The chairman of the board looked at the documents in his hands, trying to understand if it was real. It was. And they knew it. On the central table, the merger clauses were all there. Clear, legal, unquestionable. Aurora Axis was the main investor, and Langford Holdings' assets were at their limit. Without the merger, they would literally sink in a few months. Debts were piling up like abandoned ships in shallow waters. "You think you have a choice," I said, looking from one to the other. "But you don't. Aurora has saved companies like yours in the last 5 years. We predicted routes with AI, reduced accidents by 43%, and automated ports. Langford is stuck in the last century. This merger is your only chance of survival." My father smiled. A smile of contempt. "And what are you going to do, Madison? Bring us all down? The press is already seeing who you really are. An ungrateful person. A rebel. A woman who abandoned her own family out of pride." I felt my blood boil, but I kept my tone. "No, father. I ran away to survive. Because in this empire there was no room for free women. I ran away so I could be whole. So I wouldn't sell myself into a marriage that would have slowly killed me. I ran away to build something of my own," he said, his voice choked but firm. "And now I'm back. But not for revenge. I'm back to transform." My sister then took a step forward. Finally, she looked at me as if she were observing a ghost. "Is it really you?" she murmured. I nodded. She approached slowly. Her eyes were watery, her breathing quickened. When she was less than a meter away from me, she held out her hand, hesitantly. I never accepted your death. I always thought there was something wrong. They made me believe you had drowned. They said it was an accident." I touched her hand. It was cold but firm. "I wanted to tell you. Write to you. But I couldn't. It was too dangerous. Even so, I kept following you from a distance. I saw your graduation. Your wedding. Your son." She put her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. "Did you see Arthur?" I did. And I cried with pride. At that moment, the entire room seemed to disappear. It was just me and her. Two sisters separated by an ocean of lies. She turned to our parents. "How could you? How did you hide this from me for a decade?" My father lowered his gaze. My mother simply left the room. She couldn't take it anymore. There was no way to keep up the farce. The meeting was closed with signatures. In less than 2 hours, the merger was approved. The new board would be formed, and the Langfords would officially step down from the executive administration. William and Elizabeth Langford would receive an advisory position, honorary, without decision-making power. I had one, but the victory tasted bitter. Because it came at the cost of my identity, my youth, and bonds that would never be the same again. Later, in the parking lot, Ava waited for me. She held an envelope in her hands. "This is yours," she said. It was Grandma's. I kept it with me all this time. I never knew why. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, a letter. Handwritten. In the handwriting I knew so well. "Madison, if you're reading this, it's because you've chosen your own path. No matter what anyone says, no matter who tries to stop you, you're a Langford. But a different Langford. One who dares. The tears came without asking permission. She knew, I whispered. I always knew. Ava hugged me for the first time in 10 years. I still didn't know what the future would bring. But for the first time in a long time, I was whole. In the following days, the press had a field day. Headlines, speculation, interviews with sources close to the Langford family. Business magazines, gossip sites, tabloid columnists. Everyone wanted to know who Madison Langford was, the woman who came back from the dead to take over her family's company. The truth, however, was much simpler than anyone could imagine. I didn't take anything. I just took back what was mine. Not because of my inheritance or my surname, but because of my effort, my vision, my blood spilled, literally and figuratively. Aurora Axis, built with my hands, with my pain, with my intelligence and my determination, was now at the center of the biggest merger in the maritime sector of the decade. And behind every clause of the contract, every logistical alignment, there was a message. I survived. Emma, my lawyer, wouldn't leave me alone. Every hour, she arrived with new reports, projections, contracts that needed to be signed. You need to rest, she said, even though she knew I no longer knew what rest was. After the meeting with Aurora's board of directors, I replied as always. We still have to integrate data from 3 ports and map the distribution network to Singapore. She sighed. Sometimes she seemed more like my sister than Ava. Speaking of her, Ava was different. In the days that followed the revelation, she remained silent. Not out of contempt, but out of a silence that processed, chewed, and swallowed difficult truths. One night, she showed up at my apartment, a minimalist loft with glass walls overlooking the port. Can I come in? She asked. I nodded. She walked slowly to the balcony, watching the Langford Holdings ships anchored. Did you know that the company name was just a facade? She said. The dirty part was always hidden. Bribery, omission of accidents, agreements with corrupt politicians. Dad took care of it with frightening coldness. And Mom, she always pretended not to see. I approached, silently. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry for not seeing, for not asking more, for not looking. You were just a girl, Ava. They raised you in the same theater that swallowed me. She looked at me with a mix of tenderness and guilt. It's still hard to believe you're here. Sometimes, I don't believe it either. She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Arthur would love to meet you. And I would love to meet you. You're a wonderful mother, you know that. She laughed shyly. I just try not to repeat their mistakes. And there, on the balcony with the distant sound of the port sirens, I understood that rebuilding blood ties was also possible. Maybe slow, maybe painful, but possible. The next day, a decisive meeting. The new board of Langford Holdings. Or rather, Langford Global, as it would now be officially called after the merger. Sitting at the head of the table, I took a deep breath before speaking. The company will keep the family name on paper, but the soul will be Aurora's. We will have new processes, new practices, and above all, transparency. The era of corrupt alliances is over. And if anyone here has a problem with that, the door is right there. Not a soul moved. I continued. The ships will be repainted. The Aurora logo will be integrated. The artificial intelligence we use on 5 continents will be applied here. And all of you, if you want to continue, will have to update yourselves. William and Elizabeth were present, by contractual obligation. Neither of them said a word. But I knew that, deep down, their pride was in tatters. And for the first time, that didn't affect me at all. At the end of the meeting, when the members were dispersing, my father approached. Not out of respect, but out of habit. You won, Madison. But at what cost? I looked at him, unhurriedly, without fear. The cost was surviving you. Rebuilding myself alone. And now, what's hard for me, is continuing. He turned his back. Fragile. Small. I stayed there for a few minutes, alone in the room. Then I walked to the upper floor and entered the old office that had been his. I opened the curtains, letting the sunlight in. On the shelf, there were still books signed E. Langford. I picked one of them up. A book about naval strategies. Inside, a dedication to me, written when I was 14, to my daughter, who will one day command her own ship. I smiled bitterly. He had no idea how much this prophecy would come true, but not in the way he wanted. I closed the book and left it on the table, face up. I had commanded much more than a ship. I had commanded my life. Against everything. Against everyone. And finally, I was at the helm. A few days after the meeting, I was called to a meeting with the minority shareholders of the former Langford Holdings. Most of them were shocked by the speed of the merger, but they could not argue with the numbers. The appreciation of the shares, the new contracts signed with international partners, and most importantly, the capital injection from Aurora had saved the company from bankruptcy. What they didn't know was that all of this had been planned long before my public resurrection. It was Emma who handled the negotiations with an elegant coolness that made me proud. While most people were still trying to understand who I was, she was already 2 steps ahead, as she always had been. In the end, all that business activity was just the backdrop. What really mattered was the feeling of being in control of my story, for the first time. Not as a survivor hidden on another continent, but as a woman who had returned to claim her own voice, and who didn't need to shout to be heard. But there was one issue that had yet to be resolved. A name: my mother. Elizabeth Langford remained silent. Even after the scandal, she didn't try to defend herself publicly. She stayed locked away in the family mansion, giving orders behind thick curtains, like a decadent queen. It was as if she was waiting for everything to fall apart, so she could say that she had never approved of it. A woman driven by control and appearances. And at that moment, she had neither. That week, I received an invitation, handwritten, to lunch. Madison, I need to talk to you. Alone. Mom. It took me hours to decide whether to go. And when I did, it wasn't for her. It was for me, out of a need to close cycles. The house was as I remembered it, opulent, cold, full of flowers that looked more artificial than they were. I entered unannounced. The housekeeper was still the same. She seemed not to have aged a day. My mother was in the winter garden, sitting with a cup of tea in her hands, motionless, as if the whole thing were a play performed just for me. Madison, she said, her voice low. Elizabeth, I replied. She blinked. I had never gotten used to calling her that, but at that moment there was no more room for Mom. Not yet. You're fine, she said, as if it were a banal observation. Very different. Yes. Because now I am who I should have been, if you hadn't buried me while I was alive. She didn't defend herself. She just lowered her gaze. Your father was afraid. When he saw what you were building, when he found out that Aurora was yours, he wanted to stop the damage. But he didn't know how. So he chose the cruelest way to silence you. And you let him. She hesitated, was an accomplice. It's true. But not because I wanted to be. Because I was also shaped that way. Believing that maintaining the structure was more important than protecting the children. I felt a lump in my throat. Not from sadness, but from exhaustion. Did you know where I was? I asked. She shook her head negatively. I only found out later. A long time later. But it was too late. Your father wouldn't even let us say your name. It was as if you had been deleted from our history. But I wasn't. No, she murmured. And now you're here. Bigger than the 2 of us together. Bigger than everything we tried to hide. There was a heavy silence. I didn't come to forgive, Elizabeth. Or to comfort you. I just wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you that I'm not what you tried to make me out to be. She nodded, her eyes welling up. I know. And despite everything, I'm proud of it. I stood up. Her teacup trembled slightly in her hands. You've lost a lot, I said before leaving. But so have I. Only, unlike you, I've turned that loss into life. I walked back to the car without looking back. That night, I walked to the port. The sky was clear and the smell of salt reminded me of a time when the world seemed much bigger than me. I looked at the ships still bearing the old Langford coat of arms, ready to receive their new paint job, the Aurora logo, with the phoenix's wings flaming in blue and gold. It was too symbolic to be a coincidence. Emma arrived with 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne. Do you think it's finally over? She asked. I took a glass. It's not over. It's just beginning. And you? Are you going to carry on the Langford name? I looked at the reflection of the sea. I thought of the girl who was buried under lies. The young woman who ran away. The woman who came back. No, I answered. Madison Langford died when they left her behind. Madison Wilson. She survived. She grew up. And now she's ready to live. We toasted there, under the dark sky and the lights of the port. The distant sound of the waves seemed to sing of the liberation that had taken me years to conquer. And deep down I knew that night marked the end of a war and the beginning of an empire. The next day, too early for my body to rest from the tension of the last few days, I received a call from the family lawyer. My father had requested a meeting. Private. No witnesses. No lawyers. No rush. I took my time answering. The desire to simply ignore it was strong. But something inside me, perhaps the echo of the daughter who was still searching for answers, made me say yes. The house where I grew up was silent. The same marble hallways, the same smell of polished wood and expensive flowers. But now everything seemed smaller. My father was waiting for me in the library. He was different. Tired. I could see that the last few days had consumed him more than he let on. Madison, he said, as if testing whether that name still hurt him. William. He smiled sideways. A gesture too rehearsed to be sincere. Always so theatrical. Always so convenient, you mean. He gestured for me to sit down. I refused. I came to listen. But I didn't come to stay. He stood up slowly and got straight to the point. I need you. Now. Now. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You buried me, Father. Literally. You lied to the police, to the press, to the shareholders. You turned me into a shadow just because I was building something of my own, outside of your control. I know. Silence. He didn't try to justify himself. The company I was sinking. Without the merger with Aurora, Langford would be dead. The contracts, the ships, the team, everything was you. I can't erase that. I don't want to anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Since when do you give up like this? Since I realized I lost. Not just the company. I lost you. I wanted to believe him. Part of me even wanted to see regret in that man. But I knew his pride was like poison. He only stopped acting when it was too late. You want me to save what's left of your empire. But it doesn't belong to me. And it never did. You're wrong. It always did. I took a step toward the bookshelf, looking at the perfectly aligned books. I had read many of them myself as a child. He approached slowly. Madison, you're the best part of what we built. And even though I made mistakes in every way, I have to tell you, you won. I swallowed hard. For a second, I didn't recognize my own breath. This isn't a dispute, Dad. But it was. Since the day you were born. Because you were different. You didn't fit into the gold frames or the formal dinners. You wanted more. And that scared me. You destroyed me because of this. He nodded. And said nothing else. I turned and left. No hugs. No final words. That moment was the closest thing to an apology he would be able to offer. And, as much as it hurt, it was something. The final meeting with the board members took place that same week. The room was full. Some faces were curious, others in disbelief. But everyone knew what was about to happen. With Emma by my side, I signed the documents. Aurora Axis and Langford Holdings were officially merged. The new holding company would keep the Langford name as a market strategy, but with a completely renewed board, modern management, and a new direction. A new legacy. One that was born of truth, not appearances. After the last signatures were made, I shook hands with some executives. The ceremony was brief. Formal. No long speeches. Just the end of one cycle and the birth of another. Emma and I returned to our building. From up there, we could see the illuminated port. The ship still carried the old coat of arms, but not for long. We had already commissioned the new paint job. The Aurora Axis logo would shine there in a few days. A symbol of rebirth. A silent warning that this empire was now different. Emma appeared with a bottle of champagne. Do you think your grandmother would see this with pride? She asked. I took the glass from her hands. She knew, I replied. She was the one who gave me the compass. The day before I disappeared. She said that the right path is almost never the easiest. And pride sinks faster than any storm. I closed my eyes for a moment. The city still pulsed beneath me, indifferent to my rebirth. But inside me, everything had changed. And that was good, because the past was behind me, and I had already moved on.